Hey there. Welcome to Alive Inside the Radiantly Alive Woman. We have been going live a lot. We are generally going live twice a week inside this Facebook community, but we are picking up the pace a little bit and going live about 3 times a week, finishing up this really exciting series that we've been doing for almost 5 months now. We've been doing a scar series where we are talking about one scar at a time. And today we're going to be talking about scars that are on our big toe. Particularly, we're going to touch on sesamoid bone area, which are two like really small floating bones in the underside of your big toe. We'll talk about that, as well as any kind of scarring that you have on your big toe because of flexor tendon stuff, extensor tendon stuff. We'll talk about bunions a little bit, but I have an entire scar video already done for bunions. But because we're in the big toe, we can't ignore it. We'll touch on that too. And we always want to talk about 3 particular areas of interest. So we may not know that scars that we have on our body are creating a lot of other challenges, are a lot of other well-being challenges. So the things that I like to talk about in these videos is helping us to understand some of the physical things that we could be experiencing since having the scars, since having the surgery or the accident that happened on our toes. What could be going on physically in our body? The next thing that we're going to talk about is what could be going on in relation to our emotions and our energy because of scars that are on your big toe. Yes, it seems a little bit crazy, but I assure you that it is not. There's a lot of great information that's going to be jammed in this video that is a really beautiful blend of like Western modern science. We're going to talk about biomechanics. We're going to get all up in the physiology, and then we're going to dip into stuff that's equally important, talking about the kind of Eastern tradition philosophy around energetic practices, how the big toe can be related to certain types of things that you're feeling like stuck, low motivation. We're talking about the liver and the kidney and the spleen and the pancreas. All of this can be connected if you've got big toe stuff going on. So we want to touch on that. It's as important as the physical considerations, like the kind of geeky biomechanical stuff. And then we're going to talk about what to actually do. If you have scars on your big toe in any of the areas that we're talking about in this video, I'm going to give you something to do. I'm actually going to give you 2 things to do. The first thing I give to people who have scars on their body, you can be used anywhere that you have a scar on your body. So this needs to be done first. It's really important that you do this first step because it gives you the opportunity to actually acknowledge and experience how potent that scar may be. After that, that's called the 3-part guided practice, we're going to move into what to actually start doing with these scars on the toe specific to this area. It's actually a really important, valuable thing that will start to really shift and change all of the physical, emotional, and energetic stuff that's going on. So it's very exciting. If you know me well, you'll know that I'm a bit of a foot geek. So I've studied biomechanics and for a very long time, neurology for a really long time. So me talking about the feet is very exciting. If you have any questions at any point, if you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, please just type it in the chat. If you're watching this, weeks later, or you start doing the practices and you have questions a week later, type it in the chat and ask questions. Put it in the thread if it's after the fact. I'm still very present and engaged in this community, and I want to make sure that you feel like you have forward direction. So here's your forward direction. Let's begin talking a little bit about the area first. So I want to most importantly talk about the flexors of the big toe, the extensors, the sesamoid bones, and we'll just dip in briefly into bunions because I have a whole bunion video, like I said. So there's going to be tendons on the top of your toes, just like you have tendons on the top of your fingers that extend. So if you've had an injury where you've damaged the extensor tendons, that will be a very important area to pay attention to because that actually will challenge a lot of the extensors that you have throughout the front of your body. The extensor tendons really quickly link in and hook up into the whole front of the body. So that's a little bit less common. I do know that people inside this group have extensor big toe stuff going on because they have told me. However, it's much, much more likely that you have flexor toe stuff going on. So flexors are all the stuff that's the underneath of the foot, really the sole of the foot, and helps you to flex your toes. I'm showing you my hand because I could show you my foot, but I don't think that that's going to be quite as nice as just seeing me just simply going, all the flexors are like this. They help you to flex and curl your toes under. Now, why that's important to differentiate, because if you have an extensor toe issue, like you have scar on the top of your toe, it's going to challenge different part of your body. It's actually going to challenge the exact opposite part of your body. It's going to challenge the whole front of your body. You may have stuff like shin splints, quad pain, knee pain, groin stuff going on. You may have challenge with your core, your abdominals. You may be challenged with your breathing, the strength and function of your neck, and so on and so forth. That could be going on if you have big toe stuff at the top. But like I said, it's not as likely. And maybe something fell on your toe and the extensor tendon popped and you need to get scarring. You may have bunion scarring on the top or maybe like on the inside of your toe. So all of this is going to be relevant and play in a different way, but I really want to talk, someone in particular in this group has asked me to talk about sesamoid bones. And sesamoid bones are these two little, they're like itty bitty bones that are like floating on the bottom of your big toe. And these bones are so if there's like two little itty bitty floaters, we have this flexor tendon that actually comes right in between. So two floating bones and the tendon that flexes or curls your big toe under. You also have these two really important muscles that attach to these sesamoid bones that directly contribute to arch pain, plantar fasciitis stuff, a bunion, obviously. Like these two, this area is like bunion central. If you have something going on in the bottom of your big toe, some kind of damage, injury, scar that's unrelated to like a bunion surgery, it may actually like cause and create bunion problems. So if you have a sesamoid bone problem, then you may over time have something that looks like or heads towards a bunion. Now, the word bunion is something, I mean, I have a whole bunion talk, so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but I do want you to know that if you are headed towards bunion land, like if your toe is looking like it's going in a particular direction towards a bunion, you have the power to choose to stop it. You can change your bunion. You can change your bunion to go back straight in a certain way. Like if your toe is going 90 degrees, it's probably going to be really hard to straighten it back, but there's a certain angle where there's the ability to really work the foot to get the bunion to go straight. So all your toes are headed in the same direction. That's what we want. And that will give us a really good, firm, solid footing into the earth, which gives us a lot of other positive benefits, which I'll talk about in the second half of this video. But the sesamoid bones, I want to bring up something that could be going on. If you have a sesamoid bone problem, if you have a bunion problem, if you have a top of the foot problem or underneath of the toe problem, what's really going on in like the kind of overarching umbrella is you have an area of your foot, which really means an area of your body that's going to be underworking, and then there's going to be an area of your foot and of your body that's going to be overworking. It's a little bit more complicated than just a simple under-overworking, but just so we understand it, we can start to realign and balance that out. There's a lot more kind of at play there, but I want you to really grasp the idea, which is true, that when we have this kind of imbalance going on in our foot, maybe we're not planting on the ground correctly and it's creating a lot of irritation in a sesamoid bone, or we're not planting on the ground correctly because of a bunion and it's like increasing and aggravating the whole problem. That's a thing that we want to address. In the what to do section of this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can start working it to get balanced foot pressure again. But the underworking, overworking part is really important because you can change that. You can work with the imbalance so that you start to regulate your foot pressure and get yourself back into like a normal balanced function. That's what we're looking for. So keep that on your radar as I'm talking through the physical considerations as well as the emotional and the energetic. So let's just talk first about physical. It's the easiest to understand, especially when we're talking about the foot. In general, unfortunately, we kind of disregard and neglect our foot until it's in a really bad place. I don't know if it's because it's always in a shoe and we don't pay attention, or we just trying to forget. It's like far, really far away from like our senses and our vision, and we just kind of forget about our poor foot. But the general kind of thing that humans like to do is we ignore the foot until it's in a really bad way. And when you have a foot problem, if you're watching this and you have a foot thing going on, you know that as soon as it starts bothering you, it's like it's ever present. It's with every single footstep, and that can be really challenging. So, the thing I want to address first and foremost is the physical challenges related to the biomechanics. So, like I was just saying, if it's the top of the foot thing, it's slightly different. But when we have even a top of the foot scar, that's going to create an imbalance underneath. So one of the things, let's just briefly talk about this actually. One of the things that I talk about is the difference between a pressure problem or a centration problem. If you have scarring on a joint, the big toe is a kind of a little area. So if you have a scar on your big toe, it's very likely that you have a scar through the joint. That's going to give you a centration problem, meaning like it's going to take your toe bone, this toe bone and this toe bone, off of its center. The joint is going to be misaligned. So if you have a big toe scar or that's on the top or on the bottom, either way it's going to be decentralizing your joint, and we want to bring that back to balance so that you have good articulation there. Because when that joint is off of its kilter, when it's not articulating correctly, that creates grinding, wearing down, arthritic-like stuff, a lot of pain, bunion-like stuff, and that can be really challenging on the foot because every single footstep that you take, you can feel it, especially if it's really acute and painful. So this centration problem is like the nice, easy, all-encompassing way that we can understand that if we got a scar on our big toe, we have a problem that we want to address. But the main like massive problem is the idea that our big toe is the last thing that we push off the ground with to move forward. So this chain of muscle, it's called the extensor chain. It's also called the posterior chain. If you look up Thomas Myers, if you're a Thomas Myers fan like I am, if you look up the superficial posterior chain or line, you'll also see the same swath of tissue. It's all the same. It has a bunch of different names, but it's identical. This extensor chain is like the big, massive beast muscles of your body. It comes from the underside of your foot, like all the flexors, through your arch, your huge plantar fascia in the arch of the foot. It's your Achilles that ends up being your calf that moves into your hammies. There's a lot of hamstring there. There's 3.5 of them. You have massive glutes that start to form from there. And then you have this extensor muscle that lines either side of your spine that keeps you erect and upright as a human being. It comes all the way up your neck and actually finishes in the front, in the forehead at your frontalis muscle. So this swath of tissue is so important. It's your extensor chain that pushes you forward. It's what gives you that push off. Whether you're walking or sprinting, if you don't have the ability to push off of your big toe in a correct form, it's going to hinder and challenge those mechanics. It's going to challenge not only like the foot locally, like we're talking about in the most obvious form, but it's going to really challenge your hamstrings to function correctly, your glutes. Maybe you have like a chronic hamstring strain thing, or maybe you have sleepy glutes, which was like a cool thing to talk about maybe like 5 or 7 years ago in like the physical therapy kind of world. Everyone was talking about sleepy glutes because they were sitting a long time. It's actually not because you're sitting a long time, it's because you have poor foot mechanics. And the poor foot mechanics could have been from a scar that you have on your big toe. You also may feel stuff like tension headaches, either like at the base of the skull or even in your forehead, because that swath of tissue is the same. So this is really important in a biomechanic kind of understanding, but we're going to talk about it again in the emotion and the energy when we get into that section, which is coming up next. Now, I want to also bring up another important idea is that generally when we have something that's going on somewhere in the body, we want to think about how that is like communicating with its neighbors, because we don't want to think about our body in like bits and pieces and in isolation. We want to think like I do as a clinical therapist, as a holistic practitioner. You want to see your body in its like fullest form. So you want to understand that if you have a big toe problem, you also want to think about the joints above and below. Now, when we're talking about big toe and we're talking above and below, there's not a lot after the body that's on the other side of a big toe. You have like maybe one more joint, depending on what joint is bothering you in your big toe or where the scar is. But what we're really interested in is like what's above. So, on the same side that you have a scar, a big toe scar, you may have something going on with that knee or with that hip, with your low back. Very, very common. It could be chronic pain. It could be a lot of tightness, but you want to really think about the whole picture here instead of getting tunnel vision and stuck into the idea that you have tight hips, that tightness, that thing that you're experiencing, you want to figure out why. You want to go to the source, the origin or the culprit of the whole problem. You don't want to fiddle around trying to stretch your hips for X amount of weeks or months or years because the problem, the actual resolution area may be very well in the big toe. So I want to bring that up as an idea. Also, it's not just tightness and like lack of flexibility I'm talking about. I'm talking about chronic pain. If you have stuff in your knee or hip or low back, very, very common. Go to the source, which is your big toe scar. All right, so now the big toe, because it's such a valuable piece of real estate, if you don't have a big toe, like to say you just lost it in an accident, you actually can't stand. You don't have enough like platform or like solid stable base to stand and balance on that foot. So I want you to understand how important the big toe is when we're talking about just not just your balance and stability, which is going to come up in the second section again in the emotion and the energy, but how much a big toe problem could have a knock-on effect to all the other stuff that you may be experiencing potentially in the same side foot, potentially in the opposite, because the same dynamic of underworking, overworking can come into play. If something is not working so well somewhere, someone else has to pick up the slack. So I want you to think about Achilles problems, plantar fasciitis problems, any type of like fractures. So like if you like do a lot of running or do a lot of walking, those small little hairline fractures are really common. If you're not able to distribute your weight properly in one side of the foot, all of that is in play. Toes going in funky, weird directions. All of that I want you to think about. You may be even more prone to having ankle sprains, not necessarily just on the same side, but also on the opposite side. That is all in play and really important to think about. Now, the other thing in the physical, just to bring it up, is the idea of having a lot of held fluid or swelling, particularly if you have a more of like a gnarly or a larger scar in the area. Because the foot is the farthest away that you can be from your heart, when the heart is pushing and pumping the blood down to the extremities, it needs to rely on the venous system to pick all that back up and bring it back up to the core, back to where it started. And the foot is the farthest away. And one of the ways that all of that venous return is really effective is because muscle contraction is a way that we can pump fluid back up. It's not just pumping the blood, the circulatory back where it should be going, back towards the heart, but it's also pumping the lymphatic system, also called the immune system. So where there is not a lot of muscle, so there is a lot of muscle in the foot, but it's not massive. If you compare like how small the muscles in the foot are compared to like your hip area, or just think about them in comparison to your thigh, your quads and your hamstrings, it's a huge difference. So we really want to make sure that we're emphasizing a good movement pump of the fluid systems, which is the lymphatic and the circulatory system, away from the foot, because it's really hard to get it up there again, especially if the joints aren't moving well, which doesn't allow muscle to work very well, especially if things are hurting and you're maybe a little bit more sedentary, or you're having to change the way that you put your weight through your foot. As a general rule, wherever there's scarring, we no longer put any input there. We remove the input. And a really common thing that I always am talking about is when you have a scar in your abdomen, as a general rule, you can check this out for yourself, but you won't be breathing into that area. You'll be trying to breathe kind of anywhere else, but putting input into there, really putting like some sort of mechanical load into the scar. We don't like that. It's the exact same way with a scar that's on your toe. You'll be moving the way that you transfer your weight through that foot in a different way. That knock-on effect can be really big through the whole system because the foot is the first thing that you make contact with the ground. So you want to consider that. You really want to think about that with swelling, with chronic pain, with muscle function, with venous return, all of the other kind of chronic things that can happen in the foot. The knock-on effect can be quite significant from same side leg or opposite. Now, let's talk about the emotions and the energy. Like, what could be going on with your own energy or with your emotions that could be related to your scar that's on your big toe? So, this could feel a little bit more abstract. It feels potentially a little odd. Like, how could something on my big toe be related to some of the stuff I'm about to talk about? So I'm going to give you a three-part roadmap on how to really understand the importance of navigating this and how to do it in a way that feels less abstract. I'm going to give that to you in the three-part practice, which is going to come up after this section. But for now, I want you to think about in a really simple way. If you are unable to put weight into that foot, into that big toe correctly, you're not able to push off. You're not putting your weight into that big toe because there's a scar there or because there's pain there, or because your foot, like the bunion, is now kind of changing the way in which you impact the ground with the foot, that is going to give you an overall sense of lack of balance. It's in a literal sense, like you may have poor balance, but I also want you to think about your potential lack of balance in life. Like, how is your work-life balance, for example? This is a very common thing that I hear people talking about when they're sharing their story with me, that if you have a problem with your big toe, you'll also have a problem with your ability to balance life, your work-life balance, just any kind of balance, like how much you spend with your kids, how much you cook, how much you fill your life with. Are you able to balance things out, or do you feel off kilter? Do you feel out of balance, out of sync, out of rhythm, out of equilibrium? Super common with toe stuff. The other thing that's very obvious is just your experience of being generally ungrounded. Our feet are our way to connect with the solid, stable, reliable structure of the element of earth, of the ground. That stability is very grounding. That's why they say, walk around barefoot or walk around and feel into the kind of energetic qualities of the earth if you go walk around barefoot in the grass. So if we have something going on in our foot, particularly the big toe, because it's so valuable, you may have this general sense of being ungrounded, feeling not in your center, feeling like you're maybe easily whisked off, like off your center, or easily ungrounded. That may be something that you may be experiencing, because quite literally with every single footstep, you are ungrounded. So that gets kind of pulled through your whole system, not just physically, but also your energetics. So that is something very common. Now, this is very interesting, and it plays into the extensor chain that we were talking about. The big toe is the last push off of that solid earth element off of the ground. It helps you to walk properly. It gives you like speed and agility and all of that, but in a really simple way, just walking around, you need your big toe to push off. So if you don't have access to your big toe because of the scar, and we just said all the reasons why you won't be putting input there, you will have a kind of lack of forward momentum in life. So you're more easily to kind of stall out. You may feel more stuck. You may feel like you have less motivation. All of that is playing into the foot mechanics. And again, it's getting kind of drawn out through your whole energetic experience. So check to see if that feels true and real for you. Because again, it's a very common one. Just a general kind of feeling like you're lacking that direction, that forward propulsion that is so key and like needs to happen through the big toe. If it's not happening through the big toe, you're lacking that kind of force and push through life. So that's very, very important to think about. And then the last thing that I want to just touch on are the Chinese meridians that actually run through this kind of general area. There's two that are like very running through it, and then there's one, especially if you're in bunion land, that you want to pay attention to. So this is just for your own kind of geeky self curiosity. If you want to go deeper into this, I highly suggest that you do. I'm not a Chinese medical practitioner by any means. I'm just a self-study kind of geek, but I do think it's really interesting to make these connections. So we were talking about big swaths of tissue in the physical part, talking about Thomas Myers. If you like looking, if you like visual learning, you want to look at Thomas Myers anatomy trains. If you like are interested in Chinese meridians, you want to like Google these meridians so you can see the connection points through the body. So the liver is one you want to look at, kidney, especially for bunion people, as well as the spleen, pancreas meridians. So the last thing I want to talk about is the what to do. What to do if you're feeling like you're getting a lot of light bulbs going off and you're feeling like a lot of this stuff is resonating. How can I start beginning the process of changing this? So the first thing is a 3-part guided practice, like I said. You want to do this with every single scar on your body if you have more than one, and you want to do one at a time. Don't spend like a whole Sunday afternoon doing them all at once, because each one deserves your own attention. So I always say that every scar matters and that every scar has a story. So we want to approach each scar with some kindness, with some tenderness. We want to really respect our own timeline and the stuff that's gone on. Even though it may not seem like a big toe scar is such a big deal, the ripple through your whole life, through your physical body, your energy, your emotion, the things that you choose to do or not can be very significant, especially because it's your foot. We always downplay the foot, but it's actually such a valuable place and we need to pay attention to it. So this 3-part roadmap gives you a sense of how impactful the scar really is. Because there's a whole way and methodology that I help people decide, is the scar really creating a lot of challenge or not? But this is a really good like self-guided practice that you can use to just start exploring that on your own. Really getting a sense of, is this place a transformation hotspot, as I like to call it, or not? So let's go into it. It's 3 parts. The first part is the relaxing into. This has 4 things to pay attention to. First thing is be comfortable somewhere. Spend a bit of time. Make sure you have space in your day. Be somewhere that you are comfy, comfortable, safe, relaxed. Then you're going to be in a position that is comfortable to you. And for this, because we're talking about big toes, I suggest your position is seated because you want to make touch contact. You want to make skin to skin contact, hand touching your big toe in a way that's very meaningful, not just in a way that is like similar to how you put on clothes in the day or makeup or brush your hair or put lotion on. That's a very like unconscious, just kind of superficial kind of brush by your body. I want you to make a meaningful connection, and you could say this internally or you can say it out loud, but just in some sort of way say that you're going to make contact with an area that you may have neglected, that you were, afraid to feel into, or that you're just curious about. Maybe you weren't avoiding it, or maybe you weren't neglecting it, but you didn't, or maybe you even didn't know how to start. So just having that like open invitation to feel into something that is meaningful, that you could start to change, that's where you want to start this practice. And the 4th part of relaxing into is to close your eyes. So you can really ramp up the sense of touch, tone down the sense of sight. It feels comfortable and like nourishing to be in that space with yourself. So that's all the relaxing into. Phase 2, what I want you to do is gather as much of the physical qualities as you can local to the scar. So what does that mean? I want you to feel all of the different things related to that scar. Hey, Simone. I want you to feel the numbness. I want you to feel places of hypersensitivity. Gather all of that information. Is it hot? Is it cold? On the big toe in general, like it's not really like the fleshiest of places. So you also want to feel for the scar and how it's attached and anchored onto bone, which is a significant thing that I always talk about. So all scars will be anchored onto bone. It definitely will be on your big toe. It may be challenging range of motion. It may be, moving your toes in different directions because it's really latched and anchored on. You want to pay attention to that and feel where that is. Areas of tension, puckering, where it's like stuck in the skin. All of that you need to pay attention to and figure out. And then just check how you feel like internally. Do you have an aversion to touching it? Do you feel icky? Do you feel nauseous? All of this stuff is really common. It may catch you off surprise, which is exactly why we're doing this practice, so that you actually recognize that there's some healing potential there. There's some good stuff that you can do there. So that's the physical. And then the third part is gathering as much information as you can about the emotion and the energy that's local to the area. So this is where you really start to think and feel about your own story, because every scar has a story, like I just said. And you want to think about the impact that this whole kind of event and situation, that's much more than just the surgery or the accident. There's this kind of energetic quality before it happens as well as after. So this three-part roadmap that I was mentioning before is thinking about the before the event or surgery, the during, and then the after. So what does that mean? The before. If it was just an accident, like it was just a coming in hot kind of thing and you didn't expect it and there's nothing really related to it, this may be a very like limited area to think about. However, if you were like a runner, for example, and you were like wearing down the area, you were having a lot of micro trauma there, maybe a lot of abuse in the area, not paying attention, not really, being very curious, just kind of running it down. What was going on in your like mind, dialogue, your thoughts, like even just stretch it out to your exercise routine, your goals. A lot of people who are runners or who exercise really hard have toe stuff, but it's not always the case. It can be the exact opposite. It's like it could also be like the most sedentary person who doesn't really move their body very well could also have toe stuff, big toe stuff. So you want to think about that for yourself. Then the during is obvious. It's the during the surgery or the accident itself. So it could be, it could be like any type of scenario here, but all of this stuff will have something to do with fear. So we need to consider that, especially if it's a surgery, because you will always be afraid during a surgery. There's always a fear aspect involved, and so we want to pay attention to that, as well as relationship dynamics that were going on with people around you, medical staff, spouse, friends, coworkers, whatever the situation was. All of that will play into what's caught and like bound up and all gnarled up into the scar. And then the after, this is really important because this whole video has been like, what could be going on after? And so it could be super simple and like cut and dry, like now I can't run and this really sucks. What does that do? What does that like the mental stuff that goes on inside someone when a runner can't run anymore is really big. It's huge. It's not just a runner. It could be a dancer. It could be, anyone who's really into fitness or health or being active. You need your big toe to literally walk. So you want to consider all of that, but then like try to work it backwards into something that's really deep and meaningful. Try to like go more than just superficial. It's not like I can't work out anymore and that sucks. I mean, it does suck, but what is actually behind that? What is the working out giving you? Like, what is that allowing you to feel on the inside? Like, is this big toe scar really just fragmented and took a hammer to your confidence, took a hammer to like how you feel about yourself? You can really trace these things back into something that's really tender, and that's what you want to do with this three-part roadmap. Then you want to think about all the stuff I just spoke about, being not motivated, challenged, pushing forward, off balance, ungrounded, trying to get your like work-life balance together and it's like in shambles. You can't really figure it out. It's really common with people who have big toe stuff going on. So that's what I want you to think about for the three-part practice. Gather as much as that as you can so you have a really good sense of how impactful this big toe scar really is to your well-being. It probably is a lot more impactful than you recognize because, like I said, the poor foot and toes really get the short end of the stick. They don't get a lot of recognition. Okay, so what do we do with the big toe in general? Like, how do we start working this scar? How do we begin? Well, the first thing that you want to do is start to build an awareness back with the toe. It's very easy for your mind to like black out a toe. Like just a simple awareness practice. If you're just sitting here right now, can you feel all 10 of your toes? Very commonly, people can't. They have no idea where all 10 toes are, especially if you have a scar there or you've broken any of your toes or sprained your toes, like Simone says. It feels really hard to like bring your mind and feel all 10 of your toes. So this is going to be like I guess an advanced version of bringing your attention and awareness there. This is a foundational step that I do for all people when we're trying to work through their biomechanics. It's really the basis and foundation of a style of philosophy and biomechanics and therapy and assessment tool called Anatomy and Motion. And it's understanding the importance of our tripod on our foot and how to work with that. So this is a really long conversation and I go really in depth with it often, like many times over with my clients, but just a really like 101 kind of crash course on it. I want you to imagine, well, you do have a tripod in a triangle-like shape underneath both feet. It is the heel, and then you have the fifth metatarsal. Also, you want to like the fifth toe or the little toe mound that's on the ball of your foot. So not your toe, but like the toe knuckle or like right before your toe, all these different ways to say it. And then the exact same one for the big toe. It's the ball of your foot and the big toe knuckle, the first metatarsal, the big toe mound, however you want to say it. You want to imagine that there's that tripod. That tripod needs to make contact when your knee is bending. It needs to make contact with the ground. So the thing that I want to share with you is just a really simple thing called tripod knee bends. And this is like I said, a foundational thing that you need to learn because if you get your tripod on the ground, then you're much more likely to have a really good push off of your foot, a lot more likely to activate and work that extensor chain and get that really nice positive forward momentum in life energetically, but also biomechanically, and it will all start to like kind of positively upswing from there. So what is a tripod knee bend? You're going to be standing. You're going to put one foot forward, put it forward as far as you would like a natural walking pace, not like a yoga lunge or like an exercise lunge, just like put the foot forward and put it all the way down flat on the ground. So you're kind of like split stance, both feet are in line with your hips. And you want to feel that you have your tripod. So here's like my hand version. Here's my heel in my hand, the fifth toe mound and the first toe mound. All of that needs to remain on the contact with the ground. I guess the tripod's really like this if we're going to go with thumb, but that looks crazy. That doesn't look like a big foot at all, a foot at all. But you know what I mean. So you're going to get that down on the ground and then you're going to bend your knee, lean into that front foot. I want you to get as much as your weight as you can on the front foot. So the back heel will lift off the ground. And you're going to get something like 80-20 of your weight, or maybe even like 90-10, meaning a lot of your weight is on your front foot while maintaining your tripod. Okay, you want to feel like you have equal pressure through there as you bend your knee, as you lean your weight forward. I don't want you to pitch your chest and like really like topple forward. You're going to be really tall and upright, but a lot of your weight is on top of that front foot, almost as if you could take your back foot completely off the ground, but keep it on the ground. Don't lose it. Don't lose that that contact with the ground of the back foot. You should have 2 points of contact, 2 of your tripod points, not all 3. So you're going to kind of like rock in and out of that movement and see if you can really assess like how well can I keep that tripod contact. It's very common to lose your heel contact. People will tell me all the time. They'll say like, "Oh yeah, I have my heel on the ground." But actually like people don't. It's because they lose that sensorial awareness of their foot. And the other area that they lose contact with is almost always their big toe. Their big toe mound. They'll try to put it like on their toenail, so like at the very tip of the big toe. We don't want that. We want to really keep the tripod clean and have equal weight through there. You can do that with both sides. You can compare like your good side for your bad side, although I don't like that terminology. But just doing that helps to really re-engage having proper contact with the ground, and it will improve all the stuff that we spoke about in this video. So I think that that is all that I want to share with you today. That was a lot. We touched on a lot of biomechanics stuff as well as a really good chunk of emotional and energetic consideration. So I hope that that was useful. Thank you for joining me. We're going to keep going. Like I said, we have a lot or a few more to go. How many do we have? I think we have like maybe 5 or 6 more to go. And I'm going to announce 2 exciting things that are coming to this group. I'm going to announce it on Friday because Friday is the 1st of October. Happened really fast. So I am looking forward to sharing these 2 surprises with you then. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me. If you have any questions or you want to try the practice for a while and ask me later, please feel free to type it inside this video. I will see it and answer it as soon as I can. All right, bye.